nervous because I'm here now.
Hey guys, welcome into another episode of 410 Sports Talk. James Haskell here with my co-host Glenn Martin and our friend of the show, Evan Brennan, Evan the Agent, as you guys might know him in Twitterverse. He's an NFL agent, and we're really excited to talk to him about all the moving parts that are going into this extremely unique 2020 season. So Glenn, I'm going to let you kick this off here and start the interrogation.
Well, Evan, thanks again for coming on. When we had you on before the draft, you made the prediction that it would be a really tough year to be drafted if you didn't attend the scouting combine. Did that prediction end up holding true?
For the most part. There were more guys drafted than I thought, but not as many as a normal year.
Okay. So a slight decline or still pretty – okay.
Probably by about 30% decline.
Oh, wow. And then the other thing that you mentioned and the phrase that we've actually used a couple times on the show since then is Hall of Fame reps when referring to those undrafted guys. When you're talking about a truncated preseason where, as far as camp goes, there's no preseason games. What is your messaging to your guys that are undrafted as far as, focusing on those Hall of Fame reps or, what is it that you're giving them as far as information and a viewpoint to have when they're in camp?
First and foremost, volunteer yourself for every special team opportunity you get. Guys that play special teams are going to get better opportunities. Be a PhD doctor of the playbook. Know everything. Do not miss assignments. And when you get that rep to go live in pads, if you're a defensive lineman, you got to beat that guy in front of you. If you're a corner, you got to get that PBU. If you're a receiver, you cannot drop that ball, and so on and so forth.
Gotcha. And with that limited training camp and canceled preseason games, do you think this could be a year where we see an unprecedented lack of undrafted free agents making the week one rosters?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting a little bit more hopeful for some of those guys with some of the opt-outs and a little bit of space. But overall, I mean, my prediction, and I realize I'm going out a little bit on a limb here, is about one undrafted guy will make an active opening day roster for a team. I bet that's the average. We'll see how firm that holds.
Yeah, that's interesting because the Ravens, of course, and I'm sure as you're aware, have a tradition of having one guy. I think it's been, 16 years or so now, Glenn, something like
16,
that?
17, yeah.
And so we're interested to see who that'll be and if that tradition will stay alive. So that'll be a fun one to keep an eye on. Now, we have a couple questions as far as the details of the opt-out go. And as you mentioned, before we hopped on the show here, everyone, including yourself, is kind of receiving information as it comes. Right. But as far as as far as like money received and who's a high risk and a low risk guy, do you mind just in general terms giving us a little bit of details for those that don't have a ton of information and are just kind of seeing these opt-outs and are confused by them? What does it mean for each guy and what's the money? Like, what's the payout?
Yeah, nothing's final until it's signed. So what I'm about to say is kind of the deal points as they exist right now, with obviously the disclaimer that things can change. For guys on the active roster last year that remain on the team and are going into training camp, if they opt out, it's about $350K is kind of what they're looking at. Guys on the practice squad from last year still on the team, you're looking at $150K. Now, there is some language for $350K for some high-risk players as to exactly what that is. There's been some things thrown around, but that has not been finalized as to what that is. For guys that are undrafted this year, they really don't have any options but to give it a go. They're not eligible for that $150K this year. So that's kind of how it looks for now. We'll see how it all shakes up when this thing gets signed.
Well, how does it affect players that recently signed like big free agent contracts? We saw Michael Pierce from the Vikings decide to opt out this season. Does that affect his signing bonus and does it affect his contract going forward?
I mean, as it stands now, it should not affect his signing bonus unless there was some particular language that he had to place a certain amount of reps or something like that in a signing bonus, which would be unusual. It doesn't look like that. There could be other bonuses that he may not be eligible for, nearly guaranteed money, as we sometimes call it, that just based on just being on the active roster, that may be affected. But as far as his normal guarantees and a signing bonus, that should stick pretty firm moving forward.
All right, so the other thing that we wanted to talk about was the quarterback position, namely Patrick Mahomes. And as you know, the quarterback here in town is the MVP, Lamar Jackson. And so Patrick Mahomes stole the headlines when he got that huge deal. The headline was, $500 million, a little over $500 million for the 10 years. But if you look at it as far as the information that Glenn and I have been able to get, it seems like it gives the team a lot of flexibility moving forward. As far as that goes, do you see other teams trying to work on getting creative with deals such as that? And then do you expect the Ravens to look at that and try and mirror a situation that's similar to that when they come to the table with Lamar?
Yeah, I mean, I know his agent pretty well. He's a mentor of mine. It's Lee Steinberg. Lee and I are good friends. He was actually my sports law professor in law school, and I know Lee's style of negotiating well. And I know the front office there in Kansas City pretty well. I have a couple of Chiefs myself, starters even. So having said that, yes, I mean, I think the Chiefs were in a tough situation. They had to make a very, very, very big kind of splash financially that sucks up a lot of their salary cap. But what choice do they have? Arguably the best player, in the NFL right now at a marquee position. They had an opportunity to lock him up for a long, long time if they so choose. But they realized they wanted a little bit of flexibility, especially as the deal goes on and on and on. If something changed, they wanted to be able to kind of make some maneuvers. And that's pretty typical. You see teams saying, hey, we know what he is right now. We may not know what he is in 5 years or 4 years or even 3 years. Let's pay him right now. Let's kind of get this contract pretty solid for the next little while. But as the deal goes on, let's provide us some avenues of flexibility. That's pretty common with some of these larger deals. As it relates to your boy Lamar, there in Baltimore, I could see it, a Ravens team really, really pursuing that, particularly if the Ravens make a deep playoff run, maybe even to the Super Bowl. That would add even further clout that the return on their investment they would get from investing in Lamar would be huge. And I do think this will serve as a blueprint for young players going into their second deal to have the ability to raise their team at a marquee position, which quarterback is, to the Super Bowl. Yeah, I do see it as a blueprint and kind of a precedent that's going to be set.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting kind of out-of-the-box type of contract. So, yeah, it was kind of cool to see the player get taken care of but remain at least somewhat flexible as a team. Now, it looks like the NFL and the teams have put in tons of protocols to try and get through a full 16-game schedule as well as a playoffs. How confident do you think fans should be that with these protocols that they can do that?
A lot of debate about that. I've seen that recently. Obviously, you've seen the NBA do a great job with the bubble, and the teams should kind of more emulate the bubble. On the flip side, you've seen MLB try, and at least early returns. Miami didn't work out so good with the Marlins and Thunder. So it's kind of a mixed bag. I will say this: each team had to submit protocol to the NFLPA to get signed off on that they're, what they're going to do to take care of the players, and had to go team by team by team by team, which is kind of novel. And I kind of appreciated that the NFLPA was going to look at it from a team-by-team basis rather than just kind of an overarching policy. So that, I think, is unique, and I think that will help the players. I hope that the NFL can learn from some of the mistakes baseball made and really seek to kind of do many of the things that maybe the National Basketball Association did do right, and kind of say, hey, we've got some real knowledge here from bad actions and good actions. How can we best emulate those for our game and ensure that this goes as smoothly as possible? I expect there to be hiccups. There always will be, particularly with this many people. But if you can minimize those, I think the NFL will be okay.
Yeah, and the other name that we wanted to talk about as well was, we wanted to get your opinion on a couple headlines that recently happened. Jamal Adams, of course, was a guy that announced to the world and probably beyond the world, I'm guessing that the outer ends of the universe heard that he wanted to be traded. Yes. How much does that have an impact on the leverage of the team that is trying to trade him? And are there situations where it then negatively affects, the trade leverage they have when talking about a commodity such as Jamal Adams?
There's a lot of moving parts to that. I mean, obviously, Jamal Adams is probably the best player on that whole roster. And so, the fact that he was so open and vocal, part of it had to do that he couldn't get a deal done. And both sides had known that for a long time. That was kind of his last resort. In some ways, it kind of hurts him because now teams view him kind of as a malcontent, that he's willing to go into the media and make splashes. And so in some respects, it hurts his overall trade value from that perspective and hurts what a team may get in return. And on the flip side, teams know that if you want to get Jamal Adams, he's malcontent. He's out bashing his coach out in open air. They know that the Jets probably want to get rid of him, and so they know that the Jets may be more willing to take a deal that they may not be willing to take had he been happy. So on two fronts, it does hurt the Jets in order to get that trade done. On the flip side, he is a very good player, and arguably, maybe even not even arguably, the best player on that roster. Given the circumstances, given the year, I think they did pretty well in the trade. They got a starting safety back. They got multiple picks, high picks for him. All things considered, given the situation, in a vacuum, I think they did a nice job. And will it cause other players to do the same? Maybe, maybe not. I think there's a lot going into it. The one thing I would say is it may hurt Jamal Adams in a contract renegotiation, which he wants anyways, with Seattle. They want to do those kind of things. So
what about –
he's got to be careful.
Right. No, I was going to ask as a follow-up, what about when he does come over, is there any sort of back channeling to where, in my mind, it doesn't make sense for Seattle to make that trade and give all that up without some sort of underlying agreement already in place? Does that happen?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I think people would be naive to think that, hey, we're going to make a trade without any hope of getting a deal done. I don't think that's would be John Schneider's smarter than that in Seattle. Yeah, I mean, Joe Douglas and New York are not going to let that happen, regardless of what side they're on. So, yeah, I do think there was some back trying to at least say, hey, would you be interested in doing a deal with us at a minimum?
And you mentioned that was kind of Adams' last straw. That was his last thing his trump card, I guess he could pull. Are there times where a player comes to you as his agent and says, I want out? Maybe doesn't announce to the world, but it lets his intentions note to you and the team. But after communications with the team, the agent speaks to the GM where things get cooled down and eventually he not only decides to stay but signs an extension?
Yes, and that's one of the main reasons you have an agent. He's a middleman so that these things aren't personal, they're not emotional. Just like you have a lawyer and you don't generally want to represent yourself in court, same reason you have an agent. It's a guy to bounce ideas off. It's a buffer for emotional outbursts. It's a buffer for both sides to kind of be protected. So, yeah, I had situations very recent actually in which the players come to me and said some incendiary things that, had they slept on for a little bit longer, they probably would come to a different conclusion. I let them see kind of the other side. As far as, announcing to the media you want to be traded, that is a nuclear option. Is it warranted? Yes, but not normally. It's a really last straw when you have leverage. Very few players have leverage in those scenarios. Jamal Adams arguably maybe did, and it looks like obviously he got what he wanted and he got out of there. Remains to be seen if he gets the deal he wants. So then that's kind of really what it boils down to. But it is an option. And as Lee Steinberg, Patrick Mahomes' agent, recently tweeted out, it's usually never a good idea to negotiate using the media.
Fair enough. That's probably a good, mantra to have, right? So the other question I wanted to ask you about was locally in headlines. Matt Judon, of course, is going to be playing under a franchise tag this year. One of the things that we noticed is that it looks like they split the difference between what the linebacker distinction and the defensive end distinction and kind of gave him the cost in the middle. But the fan base as a whole seems to be split on whether or not we should give him a long-term deal or and at what price and things like that. But as far as that splitting the difference between those two positions, is that something that the Ravens did to gain favor, or is that something Judon, will look at next year when they're negotiating as a slight because they didn't give him as much as they possibly could?
I think they could have stuck him pretty hard on the linebacker side had they decided. I think it was a compromise. Whether or not it's a compromise that Judon really loved is another story. They probably did compromise. I could see the initial negotiation going. They wanted to pay him the linebacker. Judon fought back, and just to keep things from not getting super nasty, I could see them kind of putting that together. I think the market's going to be pretty good for him. I saw kind of the salaries yesterday of non-quarterbacks and where the top 8 players in the NFL stack up, and it's very favorable towards pass rushers, particularly defensive ends. That's another reason why I think Judon's probably pushing for that defensive end title. Is he knows the big money is at defensive end, not necessarily at linebacker.
Yeah, I'm sure when he saw Myles Garrett's deal and Bosa's deal yesterday, he had to have been pretty excited. But typically, are players more motivated when they're put on the franchise tag or more insulted?
It depends. It's case by case. It's probably close to 50-50. In one respect, it shows the team really wants to keep you around, and that's usually a good thing. If a player has a very high opinion of himself, and 99% of the time they should, they're going to be like, this is a prohibition on me testing the open market. and players understand they have a limited shelf. And so in many instances they are offended because this is a way to kind of curtail that. If you're a guy that really wants to get paid, and guys talk about contracts all the time in the locker room, all the stinking time. So to not get paid, to delay getting paid, to put your body at risk without getting that super, free market money can be a slap in the face. So I would say 50-50, but maybe even closer to 60-40, they're insulted.
Wow. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, I have a when you look at Stanley coming up, he's a left tackle, highly paid position in the league. Obviously, you mentioned it's quarterback, guys that tackle the quarterback, and then guys that protect the quarterback. Typically are the ones that get paid the most.
Yep.
But my question with Stanley in particular, how hard is it, or does it hurt him at all, the fact that Lamar gets so much credit for helping players around? I mean, when you look at Stanley, when we had Joe Flacco at quarterback, he was not great. He was okay. He was better than above average, but he wasn't, a all pro type left tackle. Now he has Lamar behind him, which makes NFL, defenders play a little differently. They can't pin their ears back because they know they could give up, let him go running by him. How do they, as a GM, how do they grade an offensive lineman when you look at the impact that Lamar has behind him?
Well, that would be one way to look at it. Like, hey, he's helping out the O-lineman. On the flip side, it's different to block for a mobile quarterback versus a non-mobile guy. You have to play it a little bit different. There's different penalties and different things that you can get busted for, and you just got to play it differently if you've got a mobile guy. Different timing, different rhythm, different cadence, different throwing motion. There's a lot of things that go into it. So on the flip side, you could say Stanley had to change his entire blocking, style to work now with a totally different quarterback. With Flacco wasn't going to run for 1,000 yards. He wasn't going to ever be a guy that ran. If you got beat, especially to a certain way and a certain side, you knew that Flacco was probably going down. Mm-hmm. But and you knew you had to stay in a certain area. With a mobile quarterback, that changes things quite a bit. And so the argument could be that Stanley's had to adapt his game to do that. Do I think that GMs look at, hey, this guy's working with Lamar Jackson, he's really mobile? Sure, if they want to cut down the cost. But they recognize, too, that Lamar may want to hang on to the ball a little longer because he thinks he can get away with his feet. And that may lead to sacks, which may have nothing to do with Ronnie's ability to pass protect as well. And that's as an agent, that's how I push against that. Yeah. I'd probably do some metrics and show that, this guy hangs on to the ball longer than normal, and that's going to lead to more sacks in general. Don't put all the blame at my client's feet. And then I'd probably some metrics to kind of show those kind of things. So I think it cuts both ways, and you just got to be cognizant and have numbers to back it up in those kind of situations and negotiations.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine Stanley's agent's probably pretty powerful going in there. Like, look, I had 419 or whatever it was pass block, and I gave up 0 sacks. So he's got some leverage going in there.
Yep, he does. Yes, he does.
Absolutely. So one of the other things we want to talk to you about before we let you go here is the salary cap situation. It sounds like the salary cap will be going down next season. Is that what you're hearing? How much is it expected to decrease by? And honestly, one of the questions that Glenn and I wanted to know is why? Like, if they get through a 16-game season in the playoffs, TV ratings should be through the roof because so many people are going to be tuned in. So what are the numbers here, and why do you think that they're projecting already that number is going to go down?
Well, obviously, the TV deals do drive the NFL. I mean, to be first and candid with you, the majority of the money is made through the TV deals. Having said that, there is money made in parking, concessions, ticket sales, and things like that. And so, really, what you need to understand is that money is what's going down. So the real fight is over that kind of situation. I mean, there was initial numbers of 30%, then it went down to no to 0 for the NFLPA pushed back, and so the compromise is going to obviously be in the middle on that. Now, the nice thing is that you just negotiated this new CBA, and that actually is in the players' favor because you're able to actually extend the pain of that loss this year over the course and scope and time. And so what you're seeing this year is you're seeing that hit is going to be spread amongst the pain over the years, not the full 9 years that it could, but over a shorter window. But yes, there will be a hit on this. There will be a slide on the salary cap due to the loss in revenues. But the pain that players could potentially feel will be spread and not all taken in 1 year as the NFL initially wanted.
Yeah, it seems like the owners are kind of asking the players to take that brunt of the hit. Is that true, or is there something else we're missing?
No, I mean, they're going to get hit too. Like I said, the owners are going to get hit on the non-TV side of it, and so that's where the owners feel it too. I think what I would argue is, hey, we just came to a deal, guys. It's not our fault that this thing happened. We just came to a deal with this. The risk you took is not having more language built out to protect yourself within the CBA should this event occur. And that's the risk that you really, really took in putting this deal together. If you felt there was any kind of chance of some giant force majeure, as we see laid out, you should have had more laid out. The fact that you kind of said we would just renegotiate if something came out to this, that's your bad. That's not our bad. Yeah. That's how I would argue it. And that's how the NFLPA has argued it.
Right. Yeah, it's really interesting. One of the other things that Glenn and I were talking about, we'd like to get your opinion on, is how this could negatively affect teams that are right up against the cap, next year. For example, one of the teams we were thinking off the top of our heads, for example, the Cowboys are trying to sign Dak. Right now with the salary cap going down, they already have him on this huge franchise tag. How do you see this playing into contract talks, now throughout the season and then going into next year for teams in those situations?
I can see teams crying poor, trying to solicit agent favor. I mean, especially a team up against the cap and, kind of what the cap will really kind of look like. So, yeah, I mean, I've heard, 2021, you may be looking at 175 million cap, something like that. Yeah, it's going to be difficult. Teams are going to have to be creative. We talked about the Mahomes deal. Teams may have to be very, very creative. If the cap is smaller next year, which remains to be seen, do you try to spread the money out a little bit so the cap hit's not as great up front? You give more guaranteed money but spread it out? I mean, there's different things you can do to kind of move that figure around. So I can see the Cowboys being, interesting that way. Whether or not, and I used to work for Dak's agent at CAA, Todd France. So I know that guy pretty well too. And Todd's going to drive a hard bargain. I'll tell you right now, Todd will. It'll be interesting to see if they're able to come to an agreement on that or how that looks.
And then I do have a follow-up to that based on your knowledge. It sounds like one of the sticking points of the contract is Dak wants a 4-year deal instead of a 5.
Yep.
I don't understand.
So you can sign another one, right?
Is that all it is, so he can then re-up again? Okay. Yeah. I just wasn't sure.
As an agent, you're always balancing security versus the ability to renegotiate. Few players want to do a deal every single year because, you have a bad year and you're kind of not in a good shape. But renegotiating every 2 or 3 years is not a bad idea if you play at a high level, because you can push your number up every single time based on your value. And so, a 4-year deal gives security. It allows you to land a marquee deal. But on the flip side, if you continue to play well and have a long career, which a quarterback can very easily have, it gives you that ability to renegotiate and get a huge sum of money again and again and again.
Kind of reminds me of Darrelle Revis back when he was doing that. Seemed like he was renegotiating every year or two. And I don't know if anyone made more money as a cornerback than Darrelle Revis.
Yeah, Revis Island was an expensive piece of real estate, for sure.
Didn't he go to the Bucs with 0 guaranteed money? Like, that's how confident he was.
Cleaned up.
My gosh.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, the Sherman deal was semi-similar to that. There was a lot of incentive money, and he did pretty well in the incentive money for the Niners.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we always appreciate your insight, Evan. It's really cool to hear, as far as the negotiations and then also the outlook of the league and what's going on from your perspective. So we appreciate you coming on. Why don't you let people know where they can catch all your hot takes?
Sure. Instagram, Twitter, it's always the same, Evan the Agent.
It's nice and easy. Can't get it wrong.
That's
nice.
Right.
That's awesome. We appreciate you once again. Thanks for coming on, and hopefully we'll be in contact soon.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.